Support for Carolina Business Review is provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina. Please visit us at southcarolinablues.com. And Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Of the almost 50 separate programs we produce each year for television, this series, these two-part series, and this is part 2, the economic forecast, may be one of my most favorite. Happy holidays and welcome to the most widely watched source of Carolina business and Carolina public policy. I'm Chris William, and on this edition, we will look forward, in part, with our 4 resident economists again, on where we're headed this time and what effect on us and to us. Please stay with us. The fun starts in just a moment.
Major funding also by Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. This is the Carolina Business Review Annual Economic Forecast, featuring our panel of experts, Frank Hefner from the College of Charleston, Doug Woodward of the University of South Carolina, John Connaughton from UNC Charlotte, and Mike Walden of NC State University.
That's good. Welcome to the program. Always the good dialogue happens right before the camera goes on and right after the camera goes off. Gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy holidays. Almost Happy New Year. Mm-hmm. Frank, so we look forward to 2017 and beyond.
Good luck.
What is it going to be? Stable, fragile, surprising, tentative, explosively great? How would you describe it?
Well, no, explosively great is the current kind of exaggerated terminology Trump has been using. It's going to be gorgeous. I don't know. It's going to be uncertain. That's pretty much it. I think the level of uncertainty has just increased dramatically. And so after the inauguration, we would be fortunate if certainty became more certain.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's good. Certainty become more certain.
Yeah, I'm good at that.
Yeah. All right.
You guys are hard at each other.
We need to put 2017 in perspective. We've just concluded, or we're concluding, our 90th month of economic expansion. For those that can't do the math, that's 7.5 years. Okay. What that does is put us on the close to the third longest economic expansion of the 33 that the National Bureau of Economic Research has cataloged since 1854. This is a long run. So the question is 2017 the year in which something's going to happen? If you listen to economists in the summer of 16, they were saying late 17, early 18, we're probably going to see a mild recession. My guess is now, with the significant wrench that got thrown into the presidential campaign, that's probably not going to happen. We're going to have a Republican Congress, a Republican president. We're going to see 4 or 5 pieces of major stimulative legislation pass in the first 6 months of the administration. I think we're on a holiday during that period of time, and then we'll see what those programs look like in terms of what happens in 17.
I agree with that. I think what we're looking at is there'll be a lot of legislation passed, but it's not going to affect the economy. What we're seeing right now is a lot of momentum in the economy. Incomes are growing, jobs are growing. We're predicting another good year for South Carolina. I'm sure it's true in North Carolina in terms of job growth, about 2 to 3% in that range. So I think it's going to be a good year.
Mm-hmm. Michael?
But I think right now we are on this high. The market's on a high, expecting tax cuts, deregulation,
real estate
infrastructure.
Is
and I think all this is going to be dependent upon if Trump gets what he wants out of the Congress. Just because it's a Republican Congress doesn't mean he's going to get it.
I think we saw that in North Carolina, right?
I mean, one thing, for example, the Treasury Secretary Designate said that, oh, wait a minute, on the tax cuts, we're going to take away a lot of deductions and credits for upper income people. Well, that's going to get a lot of pushback from all the interest groups. So I hope we don't get into a situation where we've had all this bullishness and then to be disappointed, because I think that'll be reflected in market going down, et cetera.
So hold on a second. We got a precedent here. So in the 1980s, to your point, John, when Reagan came into the White House, there was more momentum that extended that route, or that extended that economic, right? In the 2000s or the late 1999, same thing with technology happened. So why couldn't this happen here, Michael and Frank? That we'll end up with something.
Well, I do think,
momentum.
I didn't mean my comments to suggest that we weren't going to grow in 17, and I am also on that bandwagon that we're going to grow. And before the election, I thought, again, end of 17, early 18 recession.
Yes.
I don't see that now. But my point is that I don't think we're going to grow. We're not going to grow at 4%, maybe for a month or two. I think the expectations now are very, very high, dangerously high. And I think we're setting ourselves up potentially to be disappointed.
So what I want to point out is, because John brings in the longevity of expansions, which is a common thing, and I know you don't agree 100% with that, but expansions don't die just of old age. They stop because of natural phenomena. They stop because of policy decisions. They stop because of exogenous impacts. They just don't stop on their own. So something's going on. And so I think what we're going to see is that there are a lot of good reasons why the economy has the momentum and is going to continue. There's potential policy changes that will get us some more momentum, but there are also some underlying fundamentals, such as labor force participation, and that we discussed before, and also productivity, that could put a dampener on things.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see if business investment picks up with a business-friendly government now. That's what's been missing. We haven't seen real capital investment, and that's what's holding our productivity down.
A couple of things. If you look at post-World War II United States economy, estimates are that 70% of economic growth has been a result of capital improvement and technological improvement. That's really where productivity gains have taken place. I tell people that when you look at the initiatives under the Trump administration, ask yourself a real simple question. Will these initiatives, will these programs, will they change productivity? Will they create new investment and fundamentally change the productivity? Because that's the only solution that we have to this 2% problem. Or are they simply measures to create work and effectively what I would call closed gap measures? In other words, old Keynesian type of things, when you've got a gap between potential GDP and real GDP, you try to close the gap through make work projects.
But typically we run into a problem with we don't time it very well.
No, we don't. And I don't think that we understand completely the difference between, for example, an infrastructure program, which is really a close the gap, it has nothing to do with productivity, versus an immediate expensing of investment on R&D, which does have effect of increasing productivity. And those are distinctly different.
But in 2017, would we really want to see a faster rate of growth than 2% with a tight labor market like we have right now?
Okay, productivity keeps getting knocked around here. Isn't productivity, I mean, isn't there some sense with just the size and the weight now of the U.S. economy, and you could even argue in the Carolinas, that it's maturing to a degree that you're not going to have the productivity gains that historically have been had?
Some people argue it's demography. Demography is destiny, aging society. So that's one reason for productivity not growing at rates. Some are now putting their finger on, believe it or not, social media. People are wasting a lot of time at work, updating their Facebook page.
You buy that?
Et cetera. I think there's some of that. Yeah, there's been some analysis that seems to show that. And then, of course, thirdly would be, are we doing the right things in education to improve the capabilities of students coming through the system? And I think we've got a lot of room to make improvements there.
And that's way beyond 2017.
That's way beyond 2017.
How about the arc and the cost of health care? It's been pretty dramatically increasing. At least we saw that in 2017. Whatever happens in a public policy way with what a Trump administration can or cannot do around the Affordable Care Act, I don't think that's going to stop the juggernaut of cost of Medicare or medical care. Is this going to be a bigger issue than we think, about the same, or what do you all think?
Okay, the CBO does these 10-year projections on economic growth. They do real GDP growth. If you look at their most recent one that they did in August, it's the 2% problem. They're forecasting out through 2026 at roughly an average of 2% growth in real GDP during that period of time. As a result of that, they also do 10-year budget projections. And right now we're sitting at $500 billion, $500 billion budget deficit. And over the next 10 years, that budget deficit is predicted to go to over $1 trillion, $1.1 trillion by 2026 annually. And that's predominantly health care and entitlement programs as it relates to Medicare, Medicaid, and Obamacare now, but what will be Trump care later on.
Yeah, and of course, Obamacare got a lot of comment in the campaign, but interestingly and perhaps disappointingly, the candidates did not talk about Medicare, Social Security, how to make reforms there such that we can reduce those projections for increased borrowing.
So consequently, will we not hear about Medicare and Social Security in the next year or two?
Oh no, we will, because the chickens are coming home to roost, basically. The issues are now getting so big, and I'll let Doug talk more about that, because he had Larry Kotlikoff at his Outlook conference on some of these things. But if you look just like in South Carolina, for example, our state pension fund is woefully underfunded. And it's primarily because the state legislature has mandated a rate of return that was never there and not sustainable, and they can't deliver anyway. An 8.5% growth in the portfolio, basically, which allowed them to not fund as much. So we have an underfunding problem. The question is, when will it actually run out of so much money that the taxes coming in or the payments come in and don't make the payments out? And that's going to happen.
Yeah, you mentioned Larry Kotlikoff. He's probably one of the real experts on our fiscal situation right now, which is a bigger mess, we heard at our Outlook conference, than I even thought. He was talking about a $204 trillion unfunded liabilities that we're facing at the federal level that will never pay off without hyperinflation. And that's something that is just shocking, if it's even in the ballpark. Yeah, exactly. So
the other one is, if the Federal Reserve is not going to fund it through monetizing the debt, then primarily, as we all know, foreign institutions are the largest holder of government bonds. And right now we're running into the uncertainty of how are we going to act with foreign governments that we owe a lot of money to, and what are they going to do if we don't do things that they like?
Well, that's what's holding us together. Is if foreign money pulls out of the U.S., then we're in trouble.
Okay, and here's a couple things, and I'm not here to answer questions, but I want to be careful. These foreign investors are investors. Yep. They are careful about their principle. They want the same thing that we want. So I don't want to get into that, but I do want to get into trade, international trade, global trade. It's clear how Donald Trump has felt about trade. It almost sounds protectionism. It's just the way it sounds. Is that a big issue? Is that something that could come home to roost, as you said?
Absolutely. That's the biggest concern I have, is what will the Trump administration do on trade. He talked very, very aggressively during the campaign about bringing jobs back, bringing production back, 35%, I think, tariff, renegotiating trade deals, et cetera. If he moved ahead as aggressively in office on those fronts, I think we could have some issues. I don't think he will, though.
I don't think he will
I think this is going to be one of those areas where he's going to listen to counsel and he's not going to impose.
He might do some symbolic things on a case-by-case basis, which, by the way, Obama did with tires in 2009.
Like Carrier Corp?
Yeah, well, that kind of thing. But Obama put on tariffs, 30% tariffs, something like Trump's talking about, only on a specific industry with tires. And we saw what happened. It's kind of predictable. Some jobs did come back, especially to South Carolina, but prices went up, and
I think
consumers pay for that.
Legislation's already in place for that to happen.
Mike, I think we need to be careful about that throwing that 35% number out there. He's not said across the board 35%. It's been company specific. If you leave, I'll hit you with 35%.
But John, isn't this a larger dialogue about corporate tax policy? Sure, it's like a whack-a-mole. Of course they're going to respond.
If you look, KPMG did a thing on, I think, 135 countries, and they looked at their effective tax rates. We came out second highest, only behind the United Arab Emirates. When you look at our trading, and the second thing about it is, when you look at our major trading partners, Japan, the European countries, Mexico, Canada, et cetera, almost all of them have actually lowered their corporate income tax rate since 2006 by somewhere between 20 and 25% at least, except Ireland, which has always been at 12.5%. How can you go much lower than that? We're at 40% when you throw in the federal rate of 35 and the state rates, the average of the state rates at 5. And we haven't changed it in 10 years while the rest of the world is lowering this. We've become uncompetitive from a tax standpoint and corporations. And don't everybody get worried because, you're talking about corporate income tax makes up about 11% of total U.S. revenue. So it's not the big thing.
That will happen.
So the federal fathers and mothers, as they debate policy in Washington, and you bring it back down to a state level, South Carolina has done an excellent job in economic development, overcoming some headwind around tax. North Carolina has in the light of HB2 and some of the transportation issues, Michael, wouldn't you agree that some of the legislators have done an excellent job with the fiscal house and the budget?
Oh yeah, we're running big surpluses. Yeah.
So let's switch now. We've got in North Carolina a new governor, Roy Cooper, governor-elect. In South Carolina, Henry McMaster. How does that change at the top of the House politically affect kind of the arc of economic development for both states?
Well, in North Carolina, we have a relatively weak governor compared to other governors, and we still will have a General Assembly that has a veto-proof majority, Republican majority. So nothing is going to get done unless the General Assembly agrees. I think that Governor-elect Cooper will probably change the discussion from what it would have been under a second McCrory term. I think he'll throw out issues like raising the minimum wage, obviously repealing HB2, maybe reinstituting the earned income tax credit, maybe taking back some of the reductions in the income tax rate. But again, that's only for discussion purposes. He really has no power unless the General Assembly goes along. So I don't see any big changes. I think Governor-elect Cooper will be aggressive in trying to use the phone to recruit businesses, just like previous governors have. But I don't think he's going to be able to really change the fundamentals right now of policy in North Carolina.
In South Carolina, too, with McMaster coming in, I think we've had a lot of success with economic development under Governor Haley, and he just want to continue to see that happen.
I would guess Henry McMaster does not want to upset the apple cart between now and the next general election.
Yeah, I'll bet I'll keep the Commerce Department. Bobby still running the show with a lot of manufacturing. We created jobs in manufacturing. The rest of the country isn't doing it. We know how to recruit business, and I don't think we'll see a fundamental change in economic development.
So politically, the real issue is who becomes the lieutenant governor in our state. And the order of secession is not 100% clear, apparently, and that's
because Hugh Leatherman has dodged that bullet.
Well, so far,
so far,
yeah, and apparently that's what's going to happen. So that could shake things up. But once again, it's the General Assembly that rules the state, effectively.
Well, but let me come back to North Carolina, Jim. Be kind of quiet on this one. In economic development, North Carolina, Governor McCrory kind of remade the DNA of what Secretary of Commerce does through a public-private partnership that really is a nonprofit organization.
Yes.
Can Roy Cooper roll that back and change that DNA to something else?
Probably not.
He can try, but again, has to go through as far as I know. The
these
General
things
Assembly
don't get funded without legislative approval, and McCrory had legislative approval to redesign what we call prosperity zones, as opposed to partnerships, and went from 7 to 8, and those are funded, and they're funded by the General Assembly in a line item, and so. I'm not sure that can change very much. I think that the thing that's been hurting us most is not the structure of prosperity zones or the public-private relationship that we have at the Department of Commerce. I think HB2 has been hitting us in terms of industrial recruitment.
Can Cooper change that dialogue?
No.
It really is back down to the General
pulpit. He can continue to hammer, but it's going to take the General Assembly. And I'm not a political scientist, but I don't read in the tea leaves any indication the General Assembly wants to change
There was no
that.
election pushback on the General Assembly on this issue.
Yeah.
Immigration was also a very hot topic with Donald Trump, but also during the presidential election. This is crucial in industries like commercial development and commercial construction. If H-1B visas don't flesh out the way they're supposed to, or there's a meaningful change with policy around immigration, is this going to be one of these things that come out of a left field and really take the air out of an expansion for North and South Carolina?
I think so.
In certain industries, like construction, like you mentioned, I think that would be the one to be affected the most, especially in a tight labor market.
We always like to talk about facts, but sometimes facts are your enemy. But the estimates are there's somewhere between 13 and 14 million illegal, undocumented workers. People in the country. 7 to 8 million are actually workers, in the economy. If you take that as a percentage of our labor force, and we've talked about labor force growth, well, think about reducing the labor force by 3% and the effect that's going to have on GDP, if that's one of the two things that generates GDP. So the whole idea that somehow or other you could round up 3% of your labor force and effectively take them out of productive capacity makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. That doesn't mean we don't need to have comprehensive immigration reform and deal with these folks and make sure that we know who they are and have secure borders. That's got nothing to do with this.
Okay.
But
But
it
the
isn't gonna
practical
expand.
economic issue is.
But it isn't going to expand. But the
Yeah.
other thing is, forget about the labors for a second. Departments of Commerce like North and South Carolina will say, and probably there's a lot of truth in this, we can't find the top of the house technically because their visas don't last long enough or they can't even get them because of immigration policy.
Yeah.
Is that now? That's more than an anomaly.
I would
I'm
expect
assuming.
the Trump administration will be sympathetic to that view, despite what was said during the campaign. And I think in terms of the current residents who are not legal, yeah, there was no way that we're going to round up 15 to 20 million people and deport them. But I do think the Trump administration probably will continue to go after those who have a criminal record, just like the Obama administration has.
Well, it's going to be an interesting issue with the sanctuary cities. I don't think there are any in the Carolinas, though.
Right. But on another side note that hasn't come up, but you brought in last week the issue of the surprise of Wall Street's reaction to the Trump election. And so the question is this over too much of euphoria? What's the expectation here? So I think the expectation in one sense in some of the industries is with the change in deregulation, all of a sudden these industries will be vastly more profitable. This is kind of an interesting natural experiment because if it actually occurs, we can actually see, well, did these regulations cost all that much and what's the actual harm? And so it's in anticipation of that. So there's a lot of anticipation of results that we don't know are actually going to be delivered.
And I know this is asking you, we have 5 minutes left, this is asking you all to try to look around a corner for something that's unknowable, a lot like the outcome of the presidential election or Brexit. But could there be that type of surprise in 2017 that's going to change the direction of our dialogue, if not our economy?
Well, there's going to be a lot of legislative initiatives, and some are going to pass, some are going to be, there's going to be a fight over. And depending on the mix of how those come out and depending what Trump does on border security, there are some wild cards that are out there potentially. There's no question about that.
Yeah, I agree.
Donald?
The wild cards are going to be political. I'm not
Yeah.
sure they're going to be economic.
But
Don-
no, if you have a significant change in the labor force, it could turn
It
economic.
could show up.
Well, Donald Trump was an unconventional candidate. I think he will be an unconventional president, meaning that he's going to be much more unpredictable.
And I think that's how he got elected.
And that's
that
how he
might
got,
not
that's
be
how
a
he got
bad
elected.
thing.
So I
when we
think
look
get
at it.
ready for surprises.
Yeah.
The change in the dialogue could be a good thing. I mean, better dialogue, discussing issues that we haven't done before. This could be a very positive thing if it comes out positive.
Yeah, surprises aren't necessarily bad. Right.
So we could be here a year from now,
And me reading back your quotes.
reading back the quotes and talking about what's in store for 2018, and the consensus could be, looks pretty bad. We could be looking at a recession in 2018, or it could be, my goodness, this is going to be like the 1990s again. We're going to be entering our 10th year of economic growth.
And you'll give us the number of months and we'll figure it out all over again.
John will be in the classroom once
Right,
again.
yes.
At the beginning of at the beginning of 2016, you all said that you all agreed, Michael, you weren't here, we have 2 minutes left. You all agreed that this was going to be the year of the Fed, meaning 2016. Is 2017 going to be the year of the Fed? Will the Fed be more active
Well,
than
it's
they've been?
Janet Yellen's last year.
Right.
I think she's going to try to create a legacy here. And I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see the rate increases we've been looking for
Right.
finally to kick in.
And I'm not too sure they matter that much anymore.
Yeah.
That's the
and
other
there
issue.
are two vacancies. There are two vacancies
That's
on the
really
board
critical.
That's
that,
critical.
that a President Trump will be able to immediately act on.
FOMC?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So he can have an immediate impact
Exactly.
on this, but it's likely he's going to produce inflation hawks onto that,
Yeah.
which would be in line with potentially what Janet might be wanting to do.
Yeah.
It's unclear with her at this point in time
Yeah.
where she's going to head.
You think she's been a strong leader comparatively to the past 3 Fed chairs?
I think she's been good. She ended quantitative easing, and I think she hasn't been printing money. So
She hasn't had the personality that stands out, certainly like Greenspan's. But yeah, I think she's
It would be
certainly
hard to-
been competent. She inherited a tricky situation.
It's still tricky.
It's still tricky,
And 3
yes.
years in, you got to ask yourself a simple question, because we've had no fiscal activity whatsoever in the last 3 years. Is the economy better now than it was 3 years ago? And you're going to have to answer that question with, yeah, it is.
yeah.
And you said something, you got 20 seconds left.
Yeah.
You said that interest rate increases aren't going to matter.
Well, I don't think they're going to matter as much as everyone's worried about. I mean,
You mean
basic-
Federal Reserve?
Yeah, for the
I agree
Federal
with you.
Reserve. I
I
mean,
agree
you know,
with you.
housing's not going to collapse because of that.
Right.
Jobs aren't going to die.
Right.
I think the economy's going to continue
And we're
to
not
grow.
going to see a big increase.
Right.
Okay. That'll be the last word, and we wrote that down.
Thank you.
I'm hearing we wrote that down. Guys, you know I always enjoy these dialogues, and I know viewers do and the crew does, so thank you so much for doing this year in and year out and being willing to do it. Doug, thank you.
Great to be here.
John, always nice to see you.
Great to be here.
Frank,
too.
See everyone.
safe travels
Thank you.
back
Thank
to the
you.
Low Country. Good to see you. And Michael, welcome to the group. Good
Thank
to see
you. My pleasure.
Until next week, I'm Chris William. Happy holidays. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina. Please visit us at southcarolinablues.com. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.